responses, it's hardwired, right? It's just built into our nervous systems to startle to novel salient stimuli. So, well, if you've kind of de-automatized thought, maybe you're not going to show the startle response anymore. Well, that monk did, but it was diminished, okay? Or to use the EEG alpha activity studies, those two classic studies I showed, it turned out that the claim was that practicing yogis, didn't show blocking of alpha activity in response to a novel stimulus. It was as if they were oblivious to the external world, okay? Or Zen masters didn't show habituation of the alpha blocking response. It's as if they were treating every stimulus as new, as different from everything that had come before. Those studies can't be replicated, couldn't be replicated, haven't been replicated yet, but I show them because they're kind of classic examples of the kind of idea of de-automatization. The go-to test for de-automatization these days is the Stroop experiment, where there is some evidence that both yoga forms of meditation, like transcendental meditation, and Zen-type forms of meditation, like mindfulness-based stress reduction, can modulate the Stroop response. Not eliminate it completely, but at least modulate the Stroop response, so as to show that these practitioners are headed in the direction of de-automatization. Now, I think modulation of the Stroop response was not what the Buddha had in mind, okay? But when we bring things into the laboratory, just like in chemistry, the Petri dish isn't what Darwin had in mind either. But we can see things in the laboratory in these experimental preparations that are supposed to kind of reflect what happens in the real world. So the point of all of that is that this idea that meditation leads to de-automatization is not just kind of airy-fairy thinking about the mystical East. It's a hypothesis that we actually know how to test, and we can bring into the laboratory and see if meditation actually does what it's supposed to do. The answer, I think, is not completely clearly in yet, but at least we know how to do those kinds of studies. And if you don't like the Stroop experiment, well, think of something else. But at least it's a start to trying to understand these kinds of states on a scientific basis, based on what we know about how the mind works and how we know about how the brain works. So that's what that's all about. Is that all right? All right. We got 3 minutes left. What else is there? Oh, for the communal portion, well, this is just kind of those questions, as you can see from past exams, they're usually pretty broad, pretty generic, but they all are answerable, right? These are the kinds of things we talk about introspection and its problems, various aspects of the mind-body problem, especially the one that dominates cognitive science and psychology these days, which is the establishment of the neural correlates of consciousness, problems of attention and automaticity, that distinction between automatic and controlled processes, the distinction between explicit and implicit cognition or emotion or motivation. Those are the big themes from the first half of the course. This isn't a philosophy course, but there are philosophical questions here that get addressed in a different way in the course material. So I do want you to have been familiar with the essays and the exchanges in Searle's book, and in particular the treatment of David Chalmers and Dan Dennett's theories. And I picked those because, again, as with the AIM model, for all their assets and liabilities, these are the two philosophical approaches to consciousness that have gotten the most play recently, besides Searle's own, which is also represented well in the book. So those are the ones you want to know about. The Edelman work, they're off onto something else now. Did anybody get to go to Chris Koch's lecture? All right, I'm sure it'll be mounted up on somebody's website at some point soon, or you can read that paper. That's basically the latest iteration of the Edelman theory. And the others, they've just kind of not really stood the test of time. But Dennett and Chalmers are going to be with us for a while. And then finally there's Lodge's Sphinx, which kind of, in its own way, brings the whole course together in a fictional form and manages in its own fictional way to raise all sorts of questions about consciousness and why we study it and what it's good for and how it works. Anything there as we're out the door? Okay, Thursday, 7 o'clock. Come prepared, and you don't have to bring any paper or anything. We'll supply that just like the midterm. Prefer your answers in ink. None of the questions require long disquisitions. For the midterm part, we're looking for 3-4 sentences. For the cumulative part, looking for 6, 7, 8, 9 sentences, right? You don't have to write page after page after page. And we'll have you out of there at a decent hour so you can either avoid or join whatever protest happens to be marching down Shattuck Avenue. All right, thank you very much. We'll see you next week.